Rule 2 comes in, and rule 2 is I agree to forget that I left him there. That, however, by itself, just those 2 rules becomes an infinite trap, which we wouldn't do. So we have to have the 3rd rule, which is we're going to have turns. And those turns, after we achieve a certain number of things, like each turn we're going to achieve something. This is all predetermined. We kind of put together a rough idea of what we want to go do. And we have a turn. And if we don't accomplish what we're supposed to accomplish in that turn, guess what? We get to do it over.
Right.
And over and over.
Right. Until
we figure it out. And then when we do, we go on to the next turn, and eventually we leave the game and off we go.
Welcome back to Rise and Tell with Sheekha. I am Sheekha Singh, your host and author. I have got something special to share. My brand new book, Unburnable Ambition, How Overachievers Win Without Burning Out. This book is for all of us who dream big, but refuse to let burnout be the price. Head to sheekasingh.com/unburnableambition and sign up today. Now let's dive into today's episode. Our guest for today is Kris Land. He is an award-winning author, a conscious entrepreneur, and a visionary teacher. We spoke about his book, The Infinity Within. Kris is a veteran CEO and a serial entrepreneur who has founded 12 high-tech companies, achieving 11 successful exits and 1 IPO. His decades of real-world leadership brings grounded depth to the conversations about healing, purpose, and conscious creation. He's the founder of Amazing Items for You Publishing and Campaign Catalysts Marketing, and a husband and father of 3 boys. Kris's public journey began in the early 2000s when he documented every step of building his own home as an owner builder. And what began as personal notes evolved into acclaimed How to Build Your Dream House series, empowering thousands of readers to save money, avoid mistakes, and turn vision into reality through informed action. Over more than 30 years, Kris was writing The Infinity Within, his most personal and profound book, completed in 2025. Blending story, mysticism, and lived wisdom, this book invites readers to break through fear, trust their inner knowing, and remember the deeper truth woven through their lives. So let's get started. So there you go, everybody. Today we have with us the amazing and accomplished Kris Land. Kris, welcome to our show. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So we'll just dive right in, Kris. Tell us, what's your story?
Well, I started in technology when I was very young. Sold my first company when I was 17, which put me in a deep depression, which then got me on the path of creating the story of The Infinity Within, which is the book that I published in July of 25. And then I hired a ghostwriter who then wanted to keep making it her own story. So I fired the ghostwriter. But I'd never written books, so I wasn't comfortable writing a book at that time. So I put the whole thing in my filing cabinet and then went down the serial entrepreneur path. Since that time, founded 11 other companies, took 1 public and the other 11 were either acquired or merged, and moved to Central Texas with my wife, who I met in San Diego, have 3 young boys, and started writing books about 4.5 years ago.
Awesome.
And then my wife had said that the information from the stories I told her about what eventually became The Infinity Within helped her so much that I needed to finish the book. So the first 3 months of 25, I did nothing but write and finish the book. So that would be it in a nutshell.
That's so cool, Kris. Thank you for sharing that with us. I am excited to know more about Infinity Within because it's intriguing that you've been in tech for so long and you've been in leadership positions for so long and you talk about conscious living. So tell us, how does that map and how does that relate to each other?
How does that map? I guess that's another complex question. So when I sold my first company, the reason it put me in a depression is kind of the reason along why a lot of people win the lottery and destroy their lives. I achieved all the goals I thought I was supposed to do, and that I'd been trained by society in a kind of a material world that's important to do. And so I didn't have anywhere to go, at least mentally. And so I'd been hired by a bank president down in San Diego, and he told me he was an atheist, and that didn't quite sit right for me, even though I have no problem with people can believe anything they want. It just didn't sit right for me, for him. And so I kind of really spent some time trying to figure out what that meant or how to address that. Right. And I came up with 4 questions that when you ask them, it kind of tells you that there's all the upside in believing we have a soul and all the downside is in believing we don't. Regardless if we do or don't, all the win is in believing we do. And it changed his way of looking at things. And it left me with a very big question. And that is, okay, we have a soul. What is it? What is it doing here? Why? And that got me into the path of the Infinity Within. Originally, it was going to be called Soul Path. I had a couple other things around it that kind of congealed into the concepts, which is I had out-of-body experiences and very strange things that we're told as children aren't, that it's make-believe or it didn't happen or it's not real, that happened to me. Some of them were real enough that they were pretty much impossible to disapprove. And then I had a couple of NDEs as well, which are near-death experiences. And that fundamentally shifted the way I looked at the universe. During my younger years, I spent a fair amount of time studying different theologies, a lot of them, and not any particular one focus across all different areas. And then with the question of the soul, those 3 things kind of joined up to say, okay, great. First off, let's try to answer what is a soul. Right. Well, I'm going to go to the Bible because it's the most read book on the planet. It's the easiest one to reference, even though if you look at the other theologies, they all have different semantics for kind of the same stories, which is really interesting. Anyway, there's a couple of chapter verses that are really poignant in this direction. And it says, that we are the children of God. Okay, interesting. Jesus tells his disciples, you will do everything I've done, which means parting oceans and healing people instantly, and much more. And there's another, I forget which chapter verse it is, but there's one where he says, you are or have all the abilities of your Father. And so that starts saying, okay, there's this literal version of the Bible. If I take out I was United Methodist through my parents, and I was taught that Jesus and God were to be put up on a pedestal and kind of to pray to them. And that's great. Everybody has those different beliefs, and I have zero issues with that at all. It's just for me, it was like, that's not what I got out of it. What I got out of it was more of maybe they don't want to be on a pedestal. They want us to know that we are the children and just like them. And that what Jesus was really trying to do is teach us what he was doing as an example of what we can do. So if I take that in a literal sense, then that asks or creates a bunch more questions. So kind of what that says is, in a literal sense, is that we're gods running around. What are we doing here? Right. And to answer that, I had to start with, well, what does a godlike being do? And I could only come up with 3 things. Okay. They create stuff like universes and pretty much anything. They can destroy things and they can play games. Right. It's really pretty much it. That covers pretty much everything. And remember that as a godlike entity, we exist outside of time. Right. Time is a 4th dimensional universe. So playing games, well, first off, you have to understand what a game is and what makes up a game. Mm-hmm. Again, only 3 things make up a game. You have playing pieces, you have turns, and you have rules. Yes. So great. So we have this entity that one of the 3 things it does is play games. And we understand now pretty much what makes up a game. And then we look at the planet Earth and we say, okay, maybe this is a game. Well, what does that mean? That means, well, that we would have pieces, which would be us. We have turns, which according to pretty much all theologies are lifetimes. And we would have rules, which we would agree to when we go to play the game. Now, what's interesting about the game of planet Earth is it exists in a 4th dimensional universe, meaning time is the primary motivator. And if you go to 3 dimensions below, time doesn't exist. If you go to 4th dimensions and above, time exists, but it's not the primary motivator. It's not the most unique thing going on. So what would be interesting, like really interesting to a being like this in a 4th dimensional universe? And I could only come up with one thing. Do you want to take a guess? I'll let you do the honors. The only thing I could come up with is experience or experience emotion. So If that's true, then we have this fourth dimensional universe where we want to experience emotion. Because we're a soul-like being, we're going to want to really experience it. I mean, we're not here for little stuff, right? So what do the rules look like? Well, before we enter the game, we have to agree to play by certain rules. Similar to if you were to go into Monopoly with your friends,
Right.
you kind of have to agree to the rules. Otherwise, it's not a lot of fun when somebody takes the whole bank and says it's mine. Right? So the first rule would be that when we step into the game, we agree to put our godlike abilities off to the side, because you can't really play a Monopoly if you're able to do anything you want. So we put our abilities to the side and we agree to do that. That's kind of okay, except that if my favorite dog runs across the street and gets run over by a car, and I have my godlike abilities and I just tap into them and go, no, that didn't happen, then I'm not going to really experience the full gambit of emotion. So rule 2 comes in, and rule 2 is I agree to forget that I left him there. That, however, by itself, just those 2 rules becomes an infinite trap, which we wouldn't do.
Right.
So we have to have the third rule, which is we're going to have turns. And those turns, after we achieve a certain number of things, like each turn we're going to achieve something. This is all predetermined. We kind of put together a rough idea of what we want to go do. And we have a turn. And if we don't accomplish what we're supposed to accomplish in that turn, guess what? We get to do it over.
Right.
And over and over.
Right.
Until we figure it out. And then when we do, we go on to the next turn, and eventually we leave the game and off we go.
Right.
Okay. And the fourth rule out of the 8 that I've put together is that you're fully invested. You agree to be fully invested, to really feel and be a part of the game as a fully invested being. So those are the first four out of 8. But with that creates this construct where we're basically an avatar of our soul, or a piece of our soul, fully invested. We have godlike abilities, but we've agreed to forget that we had them in order to really be involved in the emotions of the game.
Right.
Okay, so what happens when people like Buddha or Jesus Christ run around changing the planet, start healing people, start changing things? And there's many, many different spiritual leaders I can tag into. And in my book, The Infinity Within, the very first chapter, I introduce 4 characters. I name 4 characters. 3 are spiritual leaders. 1, my mom got very upset and said, well, that's not a spiritual leader. Why is he in your list? And that was Jesus, which is very easy to name, the Buddha, Eckhart Tolle, and Elon Musk.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And the reason I chose Elon was not, I would argue that he would probably say he's not a spiritual leader. But what he has done is he's ignored everybody and saying, you can't do this. Elon was told it's impossible to create a car company in today's world. Shoot, the DeLorean tried and failed miserably. And yet his car company is arguably the biggest one in the world now. And then he was told you can't land rockets. And now he's made it a daily event. And then he's told, well, you can't run multiple big companies, multi-billion-dollar companies. It's impossible for one person to run multiple billion-dollar companies. He's doing 5. So he's consistently taking what is the normal human taught things that we're able to do and flipped them up on their head.
Correct.
In the spiritual sense, that's what our spiritual leaders have done. They've said, look, I'm going to heal somebody instantly, or I'm going to teleport, or I'm going to create a calmness where I don't get shaken up in my world. All these different teachings are different versions of the same thing of tapping into what we really are. So that was the concepts and constructs I put together. And then what really got me into taking that forward in the technology space was, I can go into pretty much any restaurant or coffee shop, sit down, and somebody will pull up a chair, sit down, tell me their life story. We'll have a small chat. They'll get up and they'll walk away. And that'll be the last I ever see of them. And what I've found from all these people I've talked to is every single one of them has had things that we're told are not normal, that aren't explainable, or that were imagined happen to them. And a fair number of them have had NDEs. And so I would say that those are your soul's recognition of what it is and signposts to remember who we really are. And that fear and doubt are what keep the curtains of illusion in place and make what we're told reality real. And that when we start using fear as a signpost for doubt and start diminishing the doubt that we have in ourselves, we actually start opening up the curtain and being able to do all these things. And so I've used that exercise through the different companies and been relatively successful.
Understood. Got it. Wow. That's interesting. Very, very interesting. I might have to pick up the book and read how you actually put everything together. So, Kris, you mentioned at the beginning of the episode that it was disappointing to you because the society taught every one of us a certain definition of, materialistic things and what success would look like. So tell me, now that you've written the book, you've handled 12 companies and you've done so much research and you've had these experiences, what, according to you now, is success?
Well, success is by individual. So each of us as a being, we're all connected. I mean, if we're infinite beings and we exist outside of the game, then we're all interconnected. But when we choose to play, as I mentioned, the turns, there's things that in each turn that we want as souls to experience. So ultimately, success is achieving and doing things that our soul path has put in front of us, or that what we've agreed to want to get done. However, during that journey, during those things, success is really an individualistic choice of what I put 3 goals into place during that time of depression that I'll never achieve, but I can always strive for. And all 3 of them I intentionally chose because they give me kind of the answer to your question of what success kind of looks like to me. But again, each person has their own version by definition. But for me, I said, look, my 3 goals that I'll never achieve are I'm going to have fun, I'm going to learn, and I'm going to do neither at the harm or impedance of others. And with those 3 goals, I can constantly be learning and having fun. I'm going to strive at not hurting or impeding other people while I'm doing it. And that allows me to grow.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful answer, Kris. So you also mentioned, like, when people come to you, they're talking about these experiences and you're telling them that this is kind of an indication where, you're identifying that there's a soul and you want them to do something more about it. So let's say if there's someone who's had a near-death experience, doesn't believe in soul, doesn't believe in anything related to spirituality, how would you convince that person in just 2 sentences?
First off, I will never try to convince anybody of anything.
Okay.
That's not my job, nor do I want it. Second, I would argue I have yet to find anybody that's gone through an NDE that is not now spiritual. Third part, which I think is where you were headed as well, is all those people that came to me, you could call coincidences. I don't believe in coincidences. In fact, I created a whole different word for it. And that is, I do not believe in coinkydinks. And what I mean by that is you and I on this podcast was meant to be. We have a connection through the ether, and we chose to be here together right now. All those people that came down, the one thing that was common for every single one of those people was that they had something to say I needed to hear, and I had something to say they needed to hear at that time. And that we all intersected at that time, each one of us, for a specific reason and no coinkydinks.
So, Kris, tell me, what's one of when you've met so many people in your experience as a leader and a CEO, tell me, what's that one hard truth that people don't want to hear about?
One of the things that the illusions of reality teach us is that we're very small and that we're the victim.
Right.
And that we don't control what's going on. And that both the freeing and hard truth of it is, when you see through the illusion, is that we are all co-creators in what's going on and get to take personal responsibility for what's going on with us.
Okay.
And that's probably the hardest thing. Even as I grow and do things, it's scary. It's difficult. It's hard to say, okay, I have certain abilities, but with that comes responsibilities. Right. It's kind of like in the Spider-Man movie where his Uncle Ben tells him, how does it go? It goes something about with power comes responsibility.
With great power comes great responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you start reconnecting to who you are, as each one of us does, we're connecting into great power. And as we continue to connect, that responsibility grows with it.
So you're saying that we often tend to, we try to play the victim, but we don't think about the fact that we are responsible for some of the things that are going on with us.
Arguably all of them.
Okay. Got it.
Arguably every single thing that happens is by a connected choice, even the really bad stuff.
What about consequences though? Like, for example, if I am having a bad experience with a coworker at my workplace and I've done everything that I could, but still there's no improvement and it's just starting to become an awful experience. So would I then be responsible for this?
Well, the easy answer is, why are you still there, right? Because you can choose to leave at any time. I mean, ultimately, that is the truth. Now, granted, we all need paychecks and we all need to eat and those things. However, ultimately, we have that choice. I've had people get somewhat offended at me for saying that it's our responsibility because they say, well, I've had some really horrible things happen to me. I say, I get that. And as human beings, we've had some pretty horrible stuff happen, both as a planet, as cultures, as all kinds of things. Why do people go watch horror movies?
Thrilled that they want to experience that fear maybe and curiosity.
Okay. And yet they go through movies and see people being hacked to pieces, blown up, heads chopped, scary jump scares, all kinds of stuff, right?
Right.
And that's what humans go look for. Now, take yourself up a notch to a soul. What does it look for? When it says, I want to experience all the emotions, what does that look like, right? I mean, if a human, if we're a part of that soul and we're out going and watching horror, now I personally don't like horror movies, but there's a lot of people that do that I know. Why do we go watch horror movies? Because of the experience within the horror movie construct. Well, now if we're a soul playing an avatar, wouldn't it be pretty easy to extrapolate all the horrible things as part of the experience the soul wants?
Right. That's how you're tying it back. Okay, I understood it now. Right.
So maybe let's say if your example with the coworker was real, maybe that's what in this time of your life, your path is required or wanted.
Right.
Maybe there's some lessons in the way that is spinning that you needed to have or see or experience as part of your path in this turn.
Right.
Or when you get fed up, you just say, I'm out of here.
Yes, agreed. Well, I have one more question for you, Kris. What's an overrated advice that actually holds people back?
Overrated advice. I've never had that question asked. I guess probably the easiest, well, not the easiest, the answer that comes to mind is that through, even as children, I'm going to start there. Mm-hmm. How many stories have you heard that children can see ghosts?
A lot.
And see things that aren't technically real.
Yep.
And what do the parents tell those children?
Yeah, they just brush it away or don't acknowledge it. And they don't. They
do it because they're trying to protect their child, right?
Correct.
They don't want to see their child scared. So you imagined it. It's not real. You ate some bad food, whatever the case may be. So even as a child, even with our parents meaning well, we're already taught that what we're seeing is not real and that we're not connected and that these things don't exist. And then as we grow up, we're taught to stay in our lanes and that we're taught to, especially in today's, I hate to pick on the US, but the United States has a school system and there's many good things about it. However, if you kind of go into the history of our school system, it comes from the Rockefellers. And the idea of creating people that are comfortable working at industry jobs. At least that's the scuttlebutt that's being talked about quite a bit right now. Well, in order to do that, you kind of have to teach the kids to sit quiet, speak when spoken to, don't have imagination, all these things. And so I would say that even though in a lot of cases, the advice that we're given as we're growing up, that the unreal things are unreal, and yet I would argue the unreal things and small miracles and coincidences are more real than what we're taught is real. And even though that advice is meant in most cases to be helpful, that I would say is the biggest form of advice that is not constructive.
Got it.
Is that we're small, disconnected people, that we're not souls that are interconnected, and have each one of us the ability to do what we want to do and dream for.
Wonderful. Great answer, Kris. Thank you so much for sharing that. You've actually explained a lot of complex topics in a very easy way by giving a lot of examples. I really appreciate that. Before we end the show, I want to ask you, Kris, where can our audience find you and The Infinity Within?
Absolutely. Well, this is what the book looks like.
Very cool cover.
So this is the book. You can find it on krisland.com, which is my personal website. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can also, of all places, find it at Walmart. If you type my name or the book's name into Google, I take about the first 3 pages now. So I've been extremely fortunate. And also the Audible book version, for those folks that like to listen to stories, I've got a short story I could tell you about if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely.
It's one that I'm very proud of. And that is that when I finished the book, I wanted a narrator with a specific voice. And so I really looked and hunted for somebody. And I found a gentleman. His name's Eduardo Bellini, I believe. And I found him. And I was very fortunate that he answered. And kind of the first thing he said is, I'm going to be a little expensive. And I said, I get that. He's done over 750 books, narrated over 750 books. He's also an award-winning narrator. And the second thing he told me was, I'm really busy and I may not get to this until the middle of 26.
Right.
And the books he's read for Eckhart Tolle. He's read for Dean Koontz. He's read for the Dalai Lama. And there's a number of other books that are pretty well known that he's read for. So I said, I'll wait. So in Audible, in order to start a contract, the narrator needs to read a 15-minute snippet. And then I listen to it and then approve it. And then off we go, right? So he goes ahead and we get everything agreed to. And he reads the 15 minutes. The next day he comes back and he says, yeah, I'm not putting your book down. I'm finishing it now.
Wow.
And in that week and a half, he finished the narration of the book. So for somebody that's read the types of books he's read and the quantity, for him not to want to set it down and to finish it was a huge pat on my back and really made me feel like this book has the power to change lives. And his narration of the book, if you enjoy Audible, he's done a phenomenal job of narrating the book and really adding a whole nother layer or texture to it.
Lovely. Congratulations, Kris. That is outstanding. It feels really amazing when someone that accomplished is actually giving you that compliment right off the bat, saying, oh, this is very hard to put it down. And that's, I think, the biggest compliment an author can receive. So congratulations.
It was huge. Yeah, it was huge because this is the first book that I've ever written of this type. I've written some other books in other areas. I mean, one dealing with construction, one with finance, and my technical background is fairly strong. But to take something that I put together 40 plus years ago and put it down to paper was a very new experience. And then to have somebody that's in this niche give me that kind of compliment was huge.
Well, with that amazing note, we'll end the show here, Kris. And I thank you so much for being a part of our show. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we say we part ways?
Please get the book. Please read it. And if you like it, please leave reviews because that helps a bunch. But most importantly, I want to hear about if it's done anything for each of you that's read the book.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thank you so much for being on our show, Kris. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in for today's episode of Rise and Tell with Sheekha. My book, Unburnable Ambition, is all about how to chase your biggest goals without losing yourself to burnout. You can now sign up at sheekasingh.com/unburnableambition. Until next time, keep growing, keep glowing, and be yourself, and keep your ambition unburnable. Thank you.